Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the series finale of season 3 of the Founder series. I'm Geoff Dragon. I'm a senior associate in the emerging companies team at Vinters, and I'm joined today by Hamish Grierson, who is founder and CEO of Thriva Health. Hamish, hello.
Hello, Geoff. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime. It's so for this is probably one of the ones I've been most looking forward to. So for everyone watching, Hamish and I have worked together for probably about 3 or 4 years now, I think, which is kind of scary in a way, but it's awesome to finally have you on. A little bit of housekeeping, I guess, to start off with. So we will get to the more interesting parts soon. But obviously, for those of you who are watching the Founder series for the first time, or for those of you who don't know anything about Taylor Vinters or what we do, Taylor Vinters is a full-service law firm, but we focus on the areas of innovation, technology, and entrepreneurs. The Founder series itself is our way of showcasing some of those amazingly awesome clients that we have, and it's a little bit of an insight, if you will, into kind of the challenges that the founders face, and also their story so far. You know, why they do the things that they do, why they start the companies they start, and kind of a whistle-stop tour along that journey. As I said, this is the season finale of season 3. The box sets, if you will, of seasons 1, 2, and 3 will be available on the Taylor Vinters website after. Seasons 1 and 2 are available now, and season 3 will be uploaded after the show. So do go check out any that you've missed, because each story and each founder is fascinating, and they've got a lot of interesting things to say. Format for today is Hamish and I will just be having a little bit of a chat about Thriva and kind of how it started and how it got to where it is now, and some of the stories along the way. At the end of that, it will probably last for about 30 to 40 minutes. And then, we're going to have some time at the end for a bit of a Q&A. So as Hamish and I are chatting, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask Hamish, do feel free to ask them. There's the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom. If you click on that, you can ask a question, and you can also upvote or downvote questions as you see fit. So at the end, there'll be a little bit of time, and we will try and get through as many of your questions as possible, and get you all of the answers. Obviously, as we're live, feel free to tweet to promote. That would be amazing. And just to say that the conversation between Hamish and I is being recorded, and after the show we'll upload it and it will be available as a podcast for you as you like. I believe that is the housekeeping over. So Hamish, again, welcome, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you for the invite. I always feel I should start with the clarification that I'm a co-founder of Thriva. There are 3 of us, myself, Elliot, and Tom, and I certainly could not have built this business without them. So yes, just as a minor clarification.
No, definitely. Yeah, very, very important point. And I think one we'll probably come back to when we actually look at Thriva as well, and how it's run and its dynamics. But to start off, if you don't mind, obviously this is the Founders series, so as much as we want to find out about Thriva, we also want to find out a little bit more about Hamish. So I've got a few quickfire questions just to kind of, I guess, break the tension of the interview, and ease everyone into the chat, and also to find out a bit more about yourself. So Hamish, what is the most daring thing you have done, other than, I should say, jumping into the world of startups?
That is a tough one. I certainly would have said, under any other guise, starting my business is the answer to that, because I had a fairly newly married wife, as in we'd just gotten married, not that she was another marriage. I just had a son, and starting it all came at a particularly challenging time. But outside of that, I would say probably taking a public bus out of Guatemala City up through the mountain range on the side of Guatemala City. It's probably one of the scariest things I've done. It makes bungee jumping seem very straightforward and quite unintimidating by comparison. It was basically a group of bus drivers who were hell-bent on either trying to kill all of the passengers and everyone else on the road and themselves, or something close to that. Yeah, that was one of the things that's indelibly burned into my memory.
Amazing. I feel like, I mean, now I have so many more questions that I could ask just on that one subject alone, but I should probably move on, because otherwise we'll just be at the end of the hour and we'll have not talked about Thriva at all. What would you say is on your bucket list still to do or still to achieve?
So there's a thing that used to happen. I actually don't know whether it still is, where a group of people kite surf across the channel. And I'm not a particularly good kite surfer, so it still strikes me as very dangerous. But I'd really like to have a go. There's something quite cool about rocking up on a French beach, having kited over there. Probably take me about 4 days, given my current capability. So yeah, that's on the bucket list for sure.
Nice, that's amazing. I always feel like, the channel seems intimidating, but then people do swim it, so
I've got an easy ride of it, haven't I? Really, I've got a kite under my above my
head. And then finally, just to wrap up the quick fire, I guess. Obviously, Netflix, Amazon Prime have been a lifesaver to many during a couple of lockdowns. I appreciate you have obviously small children, but are there any TV shows that what's been your go-to binge watch during the pandemic?
So, I was thinking about this one, and nothing sort of sprung to mind. Although on the podcasting side, there's one that I've been glued to. It's now coming out a couple of times a week, called Pivot, with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. It's very American, sort of turbo American, but is a fascinating insight into a relatively sort of unusual perspective on American tech, and they sort of venture off into views on politics and things like that. It's quite anti-Facebook, as an example. So I've been pretty glued to that podcast, I have to say.
I've just made a note of it now. I will check out. I watched the Social Dilemma, and I'm still pretty scarred from that. But in terms of being anti-Facebook, but I would definitely check it out. No, thank you.
This is not going to do anything to assuage your your concerns about Facebook, I'm sorry to say.
That's fine. It's at least I'll be informed, I guess. That's the main thing. Okay, so thank you very much for those, and kind of, I guess, while everyone's, well, the reason why everyone's here is to learn a bit more about Thriva, and so let's delve into that. And obviously, hopefully, a lot of people have heard of Thriva or have some idea of what Thriva does, because if you've been on the tube, you've probably seen the big Thriva adverts on the tube, or I even especially during the first kind of lockdown, most of my meals were done through HelloFresh, because that seemed like the easiest, simplest way. And I had the little Thriva Thriva adverts in with my HelloFresh boxes, so some of you may have seen Thriva there. But for those of you that maybe perhaps have seen Thriva but haven't looked too much into it, or perhaps people that don't know Thriva at all, can you tell us a bit tell us a little bit about what Thriva actually does, and kind of what you guys are, the problem you guys are trying to solve?
I certainly can. So I don't know whether this is helpful, just for sort of background at a high level on the business. So we are a UK-based startup headquartered in London. We're now a team of about 55, 60. We've raised about 10 million to date. And we're a health technology focused business. Hopefully none of that is new news, but just in case. So what we are trying to do, we see as actually very simple. We are trying to put better health in your hands, and thought of slightly differently, it's about delivering you better health at home. And when you think about what typically people don't know about what's happening inside their bodies, it's quite a long list. And practically, the thing that we have tried to create is an ability to make it very easy, affordable, intuitive, accessible for people to get access to laboratory grade testing without leaving their house. And in effect, by doing that, we see that we have the opportunity to turn healthcare on its head. Because the reality is, for the vast majority of us, we typically only find out anything about what's happening inside our bodies when it's too late. And on the very rare occasion where you do find out something proactively, it's very infrequent and there's no real experience or stickiness or behavior change on the back of it. So you've got this reality, which is that centralized sort of tier 1 gold-plated laboratory testing is brilliant. It's been advancing year on year. There's nothing wrong with it. However, the channels by which it is accessible and the experience around it are either broken or non-existent. And what we have created is a B2B, a B2C channel and a B2B. I cannot get my words out this afternoon. Sorry, long day. A D2C channel and B2B2C channel. And the D2C channel is the Thriva branded experience that you would see if you went and looked at the website. That's about proactive health and helping people to stay on the front foot. Regular testing, building up a longitudinal picture of what's really happening inside your body, using finger prick home blood testing kits that are analyzed by our partner labs, with lots of information presented online, lots of actionability, all rooted in the most cutting edge science. So that's the direct to consumer business. That's growing 100% year on year. And then we've had to create a B2B2C product because we're servicing a slightly different channel. So these are individuals that might have a relationship with a hospital or a doctor or a clinic of some kind. And those individuals are also in need of some kind of at-home testing insights. And those organizations come to us to have us help them to provide that solution. And the two things are very tightly coupled. So the quality of what we can deliver direct to consumer is governed by how good or bad that platform is. So what type of testing is available, how fast does it happen, at what cost? And that, as I say, influences what we can and can't do direct to consumer.
Yeah, no, perfect. And how did that you kind of mentioned that the problems of these really high level testing abilities and capabilities not being available to the consumer, and that's really kind of, you're trying to bridge that gap and bring those closer aligned. Where did the kind of idea for that come around? Was it just kind of an outside looking at kind of what the health sector and kind of what can we fix, or was there a more kind of I guess personal connection to how kind of Thriva was born?
Yeah, definitely on the sort of slightly more personal end of the spectrum. So my one of my two co-founders, Elliot, and I used to work together in a previous company called Travelex. And he was getting regular blood tests done to look at his cholesterol levels for a condition called familial hyperlipidemia. And I'd never really been exposed to blood testing. I had no real reason to be exposed to blood testing. And what I was getting exposed to and very interested in was what you'd probably think of as sort of quantified self or proactive health. And I'd begun experimenting with different types of diet or exercise regime or fasting or cold exposure, just the things that you can kind of do to have an impact on how you feel, how much energy you have, how resilient you feel. And the commonality amongst all of that is that you're in control, right? You're the one who can decide to do this thing as opposed to that thing. And here I found myself with Elliot at Travelex, and he was zipping off to a physical place to go and get a blood test done. And he would get a phone call if there was a problem. He could go literally years without hearing a result. And the thing that was happening alongside all of this was the fairly rapid rise of the wearable technology movement and the Internet of Things. And it was very clear, if you looked at that trend, that people were becoming increasingly keen to know more about themselves. And yet there was this key piece of information that was missing: what's actually happening inside my body. And Elliot's example of how blood testing sort of in practice exists for most people shone a light very clearly on what was broken. So on the one hand, you've got this great testing, but it's done seemingly only for those in an acute state of health, and that doesn't seem right. And even for those in an acute state of health, it doesn't seem particularly empowering. So yeah, that was the genesis of the business. We got fairly fixated on the idea that that could be done better. And if it was done better, you'd stand a really meaningful chance of changing the way that the health paradigm runs its course in the UK. And we also see that that is true beyond the UK. It's very similar in most countries.
Very, very true. And that, I mean, that seems to be a shift which is happening as well. You know, if you think back, I guess over the short amount of time we've known each other, kind of people's want to know their own personal health and to really delve into that and to improve their personal health seems to it's becoming more and more of a concern and a kind of a need for people to have a bit more control. And I suppose with that, it goes hand in hand, you know, this kind of telemedicine approach, which for those of you watching is essentially kind of you know, consumer-based subscription health kits and medicine kits. That kind of market has really grown, and that's, you know, I've always considered Thriva to be kind of ahead of that curve based on, you know, where you started and where you are now, and kind of really one of the leaders and the drivers in that. And obviously, you know, there's as I mentioned earlier, there's been quite a big push on PR and marketing from Thriva, and you're out there, you know, you're out there, people know you, people know the brand, or at least they're getting to know you, or getting to know the brand if they haven't previously come across you. But what are the things that actually, you know, as more and more companies come onto the market and try and break into this space as it's growing, what are the things that allow Thriva to kind of stay ahead of the curve and ahead of the competition?
Fundamentally, it is all born of our DNA as a business and the way in which we approach solving the problem that we do. So importantly, we don't think of ourselves as a blood testing company. There are businesses out there that are selling tests online that will send you a kit at home. And no, there's a place in the world for that for sure. But it is not what we are ultimately building. And because we're a technology business that has created a proprietary platform, we have several advantages, and we've had to establish these moats over time. One of which is we have by far and away one of the larger data sets, and it's proprietary to us because we've been able to scale to create it. And we're able to use that anonymous data to improve the quality of the experience. So that means actually the information you get is highly personalized, it's largely automated. What we're telling you can do about it, we can actually say, hey, this thing that we're suggesting would be good for you. We can share some peer stats around that. This kind of thing had this kind of impact for this kind of group over this period of time. You know, that sounds relatively minor, but it's all participant to the way that you ultimately deliver behavior change. We're able to do result prediction. We've got machine learning models running on our data set that can say, okay, actually, we can start saying, even if you're not quite ready to buy, we can showcase some value and give you something before we're asking for currency in return to help you understand what this might look like for you. And then on the actual platform side, the platform is proprietary to us. You know, we've had to build that network over time, and unfortunately in some ways, but fortunately from a protective moat perspective, that's been difficult to build. You know, we're now very good at bringing on new partners, but it's taken us time to create that expertise. And that for me is where we have a compounding benefit. So the greater the number of partners that are using us on the platform side, the greater the quality of the platform that we're consuming on the consumer side, actually the net better the business is as a whole. Probably the broader the margin spread, the greater the level of expertise that we then have across different areas of testing. Yeah, so it's I think outside in, people look at us and think, oh, they're just a blood testing company, we can go and compete with them. They don't maybe realize actually that we're not a business that sees them as competitive, though they also happen to do something similar.
Yeah, and it's a much broader, and I guess the platform gives you, as you said, gives you the data, and it gives you a much stronger base as well. And it's that kind of, I guess, ties in as well to the big announcement in the summer from Thriva around the you announced your predictive blood test results service, and essentially, as my understanding, it's essentially a way of being able to give kind of a predictive, a predictive result without someone actually having to do the test. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly right. And it was born of a fairly straightforward insight, which is, if I walk up to someone on the street and say blood testing, they know what that is, right? They can vaguely piece together what that might look and feel and sort of be as an experience, but they don't know what we are. So we are using that clinical tool at the back end, sure, same level of credibility, really importantly, but everything else is very different. So we've had to create a mechanic by which people can dip a toe in the Thriva pool. Not a very good analogy, but they can start to experience what it would be like to get a test through us by seeing some of the benefit. And it's all about giving value before we're trying to get value back.
And have you found that's kind of generated more of a stronger buy-in? Are people buying into that approach of we'll give you some value and then to see how you feel about it afterwards?
For sure. Yeah, no two ways about that.
Perfect. So just, I guess, coming back to the fact that there's this co-founding group, and it's been the three of you from day one, and I'd quite like to delve into that, because in the past founder series, at least with this season, that's been quite a different approach to what we've seen with some of our other companies, which have been either one or two founder teams, but very much kind of one founder led. And obviously here we have more of a 3-person team making decisions together and kind of growing the company together. How have those dynamics worked between the three of you with kind of a group of founders or a team of founders, and how have you seen that changing kind of and evolving as the company's kind of grown and scaled?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lingering question always about how much luck is involved in startup land, and one huge area of luck is the fact that myself, Tom, and Elliot teamed up when we did, and it happens to be the case that we have very different skills, a lot of mutual respect, and we get on like a house on fire. So we, in those early days, would work until whatever hour, and then we'd go and have the necessary beers to talk about the stuff that we didn't get to talk about in the office. And the dynamics were and have sustained since then as follows: we will all put our heads into a problem space and attack. There is no quarter given. We will go at something until we feel like we have had it out. And we can do that in a way, or we found a pattern of doing that in a way that is not ego triggering, and I think it's largely born of the fact that we all do really respect each other, and it means that we do, I think, make much better decisions as a group. And I think the one thing that's evolved as a dynamic is we no longer need each other for all of the key decisions. So we are no longer all three of us in the last stage of interview processes, because that just doesn't scale. Sorry, I'll turn my phone off. We are able to trust each other increasingly to say, okay, hey, that thing, something happened last night, Christmas party. I was like, you know, what are we doing? What can we not do because of COVID? And what are the options? Turns out Elliot was all over it. You know, there was a question I had on product a little while ago, and pinged Tom, and of course he's all over it. So yeah, you just learn to be more reliant without having the ability to be as across everything.
Yeah, it sounds like to me, when you speak, it's that respect, isn't it? It's the respect to know that, you know, the respect starts it and drives it when you have those initial discussions, but then the respect that you all have for each other means that you can just let each other get off, you know, go off and do what they're good at doing, essentially, and have a certain peace of mind, which is great.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned earlier, you know, Thriva as a business, it's taken 10 million so far of funding from external sources, and obviously, you know, you and I have worked together on the majority of that in the last few years. The one thing I've noticed personally is that the approach Thriva has to fundraising is probably slightly different than some of our other companies, and obviously there is never a right approach, and each company is different. But I think a lot of people think the typical model is let's do a round, say, you know, on X year, and then that gives us a set amount of fundraise, so we won't even think about it for another couple of years, and then we'll pick it up in 2 years' time and see what we need, and we'll go from there. And it's very much kind of, you have these kind of set dates for funding and set funding milestones. Thriva, I think that the way if you don't mind me describing you this way, is that you seem to maximize kind of the opportunities as and when they arise, and you know, each opportunity as it arises is well worth consideration. Can you just explain, I guess, for other founders that may be watching, kind of your approach to fundraising, and kind of your thoughts on your thoughts on equity investment and fundraising, and the way to do it?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's probably about right, Geoff. I mean, we have, I think the first thing to say is, I think I'm now relatively au fait with and decent at fundraising, but I don't think I was particularly either of those two things when I started. And as a consequence, you know, when you're out there telling people that consumers are going to pay you to bleed into a tube, you know, and that being some of the message when really it should have been something much bigger. There's lots of stuff if I had my time again, I would do differently. That's the first thing to say. In terms of being slightly more opportunistic, I think I could summarize it in a slightly different way, which is to quote a good friend of mine. I asked him, he is fantastic at fundraising and has raised very quickly on all occasions where he sought to do so. I said, what is it that you're doing differently? And he said, oh, it's really straightforward. I just do whatever it takes. And I thought, okay. So yeah, look, our fundraising is opportunistic because I've tried to, since then, heed his advice. And we've done what we needed to do to bring in the expertise and the capital to help us get to the next milestone.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, I would agree. I think you're very good at fundraising now, Hamish. So, you know, you shouldn't do yourself a disservice there, because it is impressive. I think. So.
Well, I've got a very bloody forehead, having gone through the process of blunting my my approach on lots of rejections. We've got a very long anti-portfolio, or rather, there's lots of VCs with us in their anti-portfolio, which I'm looking forward to making them regret.
That's the key, isn't it? Let that drive you, and just go all about revenge and avenging that, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite satisfying when investors come back and they say, "Fuck, we could have gotten in 2 rounds ago at a quarter of the price." And so, yeah, that's right. Good. We could have done. What's also quite galling is they're usually then not at the right stage for you, and they can't invest anyway. So,
yeah, that is true. Amazing.
Fun and gains.
Yeah, we won't dwell too much more on investors in case they're all watching. In which case, you know, obviously we love you all, but. Still, I guess one of the, you know, the one thing that we probably need to talk about, because you can't do anything these days without talking about it, is obviously coronavirus and the effects that that's kind of had. Obviously, you know, it's had a massive impact on companies, but actually for a lot of companies, it's presented a lot of opportunities. And Thriva really had a really good opportunity because it had this testing kits and it had it all in place, and you've been able to provide kind of home antibody testing kits direct to consumers. How did how did that move into that kind of space come about, and how's the uptake been from, I guess, the consumers and actually buying into let's go ahead and get one of the kits?
So the reality is we're very, very fortunate. We're one of the lucky businesses that's had the pandemic present an opportunity to help, and not the other way around. So look, we've been very fortunate. No two ways about that. And the two or three sort of key things that the pandemic has shifted and that we have seen affect the business. On the one hand, yes, we had the ability to create very quickly a antibody testing capability for the private market, and indeed for other partners. And we were able to do that very quickly because we could say, look, we have been at this for a long time. We are, I think it's fair to say, one of, if not the expert in the room in terms of how to optimize this process. And that makes it capital efficient, because if you don't have an optimized process, you'll typically see higher failure rates and you have to retest, and the whole thing gets less efficient. And we are not a vertically integrated business, which means that we've got the opportunity to be dexterous with our suppliers and kind of go to the best of our suppliers who are expert in a particular area. And so it certainly it enabled us to do that very quickly, or we were able to do that very quickly. But I would say that's less interesting probably than the other side of the equation, which was a lot of healthcare organizations, and I'm really talking about primary and secondary care there, but lots of the associated service providers around those industries are all having to grapple with how you move to remote models of care. You talked about telemedicine as a good example. But the same is true for clinical trials and population screening and insurance, the list goes on and on. And we, on our platform side of the business, have created an ability to power third parties. And we're really excited about what we can do to help there, because, as an example, we're working with the Royal Brompton Hospital with their cystic fibrosis patients. So we have the ability to avoid those patients from having to go to a physical location to get a test done. And we think we've got a real opportunity to help streamline the healthcare service and alleviate, frankly, some of the pressure. And we've seen a lot of inbound appetite from partners who are looking to do that, other hospitals, GP surgeries, insurers, etc. So it's definitely been a macro theme shift. I think the entire world is grappling with that reality. And as I said, we're in a very fortunate position where we've built up the expertise to be able to help, and we'd like to continue to.
Perfect. And I think what really comes across is the fact that it's you're doing this, it's an opportunity that's presented itself, which you're doing because you want to help, rather than to we're doing it because we see, actually we can make a lot of money from doing this. It's very much if you think about the tests that the antibody tests for consumers, you're selling those in a not-for-profit manner, so it's completely at cost, just so people can get the tests they need. And I think that it comes across in what you said. Actually, there's opportunities here for you and your co-founders and the company as a whole to actually help people and help the shift, help shift medicine and how that's approached and how that's dealt with, rather than a kind of a more commercial game, which I think is amazing. So.
Well, and also just to say, I don't think the two things are ultimately at odds with each other. I think you can, if you're driving efficiency at mass scale, providing that it's economic to do so on our side, we're not a charity. We have to become self-sustaining and profitable for our shareholders, obviously. But as I say, I don't think the two things are at odds with each other. You can do good and generate a return at the same time. Definitely.
It's all about getting the, it's about getting that balance, isn't it, and doing it in the right way. And I think that's exactly what Thriva are doing, which is what makes it such an exciting company.
Certainly trying.
So we're I'm going to wrap up our chat soon. So I've got a few more questions, more on the let's think about it for hints and tips, I guess, for our founders that may be watching and founders in our community. But just before I do get on to those last few questions, just a reminder to everyone watching, if you have a question for Hamish, there will be some time at the end. So please do use the Q&A function to continue to write your questions. I can see we've got some coming in already, which is really, really good. And we will come on to those shortly. But Hamish, just thinking about kind of the company's journey, I guess, so far, what's been some of the biggest challenges that the founding team has faced along the way?
I would say that a lot of the literature that you read as a startup founder before you start is American in origin. And what that typically means is you will probably feel like a big idea is going to get you backed, right? And there's a real paradox here, which is, on the one hand, that is a prerequisite. So you have to have a big idea. On the other hand, the degree of commercial rational challenge that you'll get in Europe is very different to what you'd see over the pond. Put simply, they want to see a path to, if not profitability, then certainly something that proxies, say, a CAC LTV ratio of 1 to 3. And I don't think I knew that before I started. And you sure learn quick.
Yes.
And this idea, we went out there, we were at 0% gross margin because the cost of the labs was so high because we were doing no volume. And we were saying, hey, no, we can get it from here to here. And we've done all of those things. But I was astonished how much sort of commercial logic the European VCs wanted to deep dive in. So depending on who, just be very, very aware of who you're talking to. And related to that point, I'm focusing a lot on fundraising here because I think
go for it.
Most startup founders, despite my other piece of advice, which is generally don't go and raise money, do go and raise money. So I'm continuing to plow my furrow there. I've said this on a few other occasions before. My analogy is use a rifle, not a shotgun. And when you're thinking about investors, and it's very straightforward. Everyone says, oh, it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. It is a numbers game, but you've got one of two options. Either you are going to put a singular pitch deck together and go and take every introduction that you can possibly find and wait for someone to throw a timesheet your way and then build a round around it. And you could pitch, like I did, 140 investors for one round, like literally 140. That's not a, I think it's 142. And waste a spectacular amount of money and answer all the same questions a million different ways. Or you could do the thing that I'm hopefully now getting rather better at, and I encourage everyone else to do, which is to be very research-led and therefore can have very much more balanced conversations with investors. So you're going in wanting to talk to them about the deals that they've done in your space and to push and pull. And look, this is a two-sided opportunity, right? You're not just asking them for money on bended knee and please, please, please. You're going at them saying, I'm bringing you an opportunity for a return. And the second the power tips to be in favor of the VC, they're not going to back you. They need to feel like they are joining a rocket ship, to use the often cited analogy. So doing your research, typically you'll find it's one of the key contributors to being able to have a much more balanced peer-to-peer conversation. And the other very important point is the amount of resilience that you will need is 10% of what you might otherwise need, because you might have to have 10 conversations, 9 of which say no, 1 of which says yes, or you could have 140 of which 2 say yes. Do the math, right? One is a lot more painful than the other. As I say, do as I say, not as I did in my early fundraising round. So yeah, I'd certainly say that's a big watchword for me.
Yeah, no, and I think that the research point is so important. So that's probably the one bit of advice that we always say the most to companies that are starting funding. And you know, as you touched on, every investor is different, and they can offer you different things, and maybe they have different strength in different sectors or in different areas. And it is so important to make sure that you actually research who you may be asking to join your journey, and make sure that you get those matches right, I think, as well. So that's hugely valuable point. Thank you very much for that. Final question from me then. To end on a high, I suppose you've mentioned throughout this actually quite a number of different successes and different points in time where there's been some real success, and Thriva is still quite a young company, relatively speaking, as well, but already one that's seeing lots of successes. But what's been some of the kind of standout key achievements, the key successes from your perspective?
So I naturally gravitate to people. So I would say on the people side, hiring our first person was just an amazing moment. He's actually gone on to start a business of his own in the last 9 months, and it's doing really well. And is still a very good friend, Josh Lakovic at the Wine List. They're on Crowdcube, actually. They're doing really well on Crowdcube. I feel like I should give that a plug. Go and chuck some money into Wine List. They're going to do well. So yeah, being able to hire our first people, and then equally where we are now, looking around me at a team of just phenomenally capable people, from the SMT to the individual department heads to the the most junior members of the company. They are brilliant people, and it is an absolute honor to get to show up to work every day and do what I can to lead them as best as I can to make Thriva a place that they can do the best work of their lives. So yeah, for me, that is it's a bit of a rolling milestone, that one, but yeah, every now and then you someone shows up and you think, bloody hell, that's a special thing right there. I would say, what other sort of really big ones? I have a classic founder disposition, which is I find it really difficult to stop and look backwards, which is a shame. It's good because you're always looking forwards, but it does make it difficult to answer this question. Things like becoming a class 1 registered medical device sounds really boring, but actually there's a bit of a sort of growing up moment, and a really cross-functional project, and everyone worked bloody hard to do that. We signed a very big partner over the summer, who've been brilliant to work with. Again, very cross-functional. I feel like I'm rambling now, and I haven't really answered.
No, that's fine.
I'll get back to you, Geoff.
Yeah, you can get back. See, at least now I've made you look back, so you can hopefully be a. It's
always a pleasure to do it. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to do it. So thank you for indulging me.
No problem. Okay, Q&A time if you're ready. So we've got some questions that have come in. So I think we've got about 15 minutes or so. So we will try and get through as many as we can. Obviously, if you're watching and you have another, you want to ask Hamish a question, do put it into the Q&A, because we may have time to get through them all. So the first is from Kieran, and he kind of asked on behalf of other health tech startups watching. He was wondering if you could share your experience, from the very start of Thriva in that kind of bootstrapping stage and kind of getting it off the ground, and when you have limited money, kind of in the sector that Thriva's in, really what you should be concentrating your resources and time on.
So I think the first thing to say is it's really business specific, this one, in particular in health tech and healthcare. The core principles of good startup, agile practice, I think generally speaking apply still. I would say the only the only caveat is probably, and again, this is business specific, make sure you invest enough in credibility building and research. And if you look at the States, you do sometimes find that the businesses will pop up out of 3 years of being in stealth with bulletproof credibility because they've been able to get backed to build towards this big, hairy, ambitious vision. So I think as a general thing, just make sure, even in Bootstrap, you're putting the resourcing in place to stay ahead of the credibility curve. The other thing I think is, figure out what you can do that doesn't scale, and figure out what you can do that can scale without you kind of losing any insight. And to give you the example that was pertinent in our world, we were manually building the kits before we had a fulfillment provider, because we didn't think we had the resource or time or whatever to hand that off to a third party. And it was killing us. It was absolutely killing us. We were spending 2 or 3 hours, all three of us, building kits by the time we switched it over. And that's when you need to stop it, right? You're doing things that don't scale to figure out what the problems are, how you think about what the particular solution might be. So I would maybe flip the question around. What are the areas of the service or the product that you can deliberately park yourself in the middle of, where the learning curve is going to be incredibly steep? It'll hurt like probably for as long as you're continuing to do it, excuse my French, but the amount that you will glean as a consequence might transform your business. And then, again, just good practice here, stay glued to your customers, absolutely glued to them. And what's funny is there's this tipping moment where when you get, I'm using a direct consumer example here, when you get to 20 people, 20 customers that you don't know the names of, it's like, can I really learn from 20? And the answer is, you can probably learn a bit. At 50, can I talk to all 50? Yeah, you can still talk to all 50, but is 50 really representative of the population? And then you get to 100, and then you get to 200. And the reality is, if you want to build, and I'll use Kevin Kelly's heuristic here of 1,000 true fans who will love you, the only way you're going to get there is by staying absolutely just cemented to the feedback that they have for your product. And it's really easy. We made the mistake ourselves a couple of times, just starting to drift back from the coal face of what's happening right here at that moment with the product. So yeah, just sticking out those hard yards, taking your time, really understanding how to solve those early problems.
And presumably also, if you realize you are drifting away, kind of acting quickly to kind of bring it back and kind of re-engage, isn't it, as well, is the key there.
Yeah, one final thing. I don't know whether this is quite at the bootstrap stage. I think it probably is. I mean, it's you forever have a reality, which is that you can kind of do anything at any point, which is simultaneously one of the reasons that people start businesses, but it's also one of the things that kills businesses. And I thought I understood focus, and it transpired that I didn't, until Tom, one of my co-founders, explained. I was listening to a company presentation that he was giving on focus, and focus is not doing really good ideas. And I'd always sort of thought about focus as not doing mediocre ideas. And when I finally got my head around that as a reality, I found it much easier to stay on something for long enough to see it through the inevitably difficult yards that you experience whenever you're doing something new.
Perfect, thank you. We've had an anonymous question come in, but it's quite an interesting one. And so how did you go about building confidence in Thriva when, at the time Thriva kind of came about, there were, and they've used the phrase bad stories in the market, and that's probably right. You know, for example, Theranos and those types of stories. Was there, how did you build back up that kind of public trust in the Thriva kind of service?
So interestingly, look, I think the reality is that Theranos didn't really impact the consumer market. Most people weren't aware of Theranos. That is not the case today. I think more people are aware of it today. In the VC community, 100% of them were aware of it after Theranos set fire to more investor dollars than most people know what to do with. So we had challenges on that front, less so on the consumer front. But the other certainly pertinent reality was, how did we build and maintain trust and credibility? And the honest answer is it's a constant project, and it's never done. But it was about, for us, a couple of core tenets, making sure that we had really, really bulletproof UX and UI, which sounds odd, but you have to create something that feels, when you're sort of, touching it and feeling it, either literally in our case, because we've got physical kits, or you're doing that digitally, that it's super robust and it's built by people who know what they're doing. And then, borrowing from the medical profession's credibility wherever it was required. So we had a medical director fairly early on, and we've always had GPs either on staff or as part of our network. And we were also able to borrow from some of the credibility of our partners. So yeah, that's how we did it.
No, thank you. Callum's asked, looking back, were there more generally any mistakes that you made whilst building Thriva up, which actually you wish you could have avoided, or perhaps actually looking back you think you could have avoided? And you may have touched on some of them already, but in terms of, I guess, helpful hints for those that may be watching to kind of avoid making.
I would say, yeah, a tricky one, because we make so many mistakes every day. It's just, it's participant to a high growth startup's reality, right? If you're not making mistakes, you're probably not pressing hard enough, to quote the usual trope. But that one is true. I would say the one thing that always gets tempting, in particular for D2C startups, where you're trying to diversify your channel mix away from reliant on performance marketing platforms, is a partner comes along and says, hey, we want to use you. We're really aligned. Can we do something together? And you kiss goodbye to 3 months worth of engineering resource, only to discover that maybe it wasn't worthwhile. And it's difficult, that one, because maybe some of those work out, maybe some of them work out. And it's so tempting to kind of cross your fingers and hope. But that, for me, is one of those things where, how much better could you have made your own product in that period of time? It was probably inbound. You often find that they are, the ones that destabilize you are ones that come to you rather than you've gone prospecting for. And to that point, if you said to yourself, on your terms, I'm going to go and find partners, might that be something that is less destabilizing? And the answer is yes, probably. So it's all back to focus. Can you serve yourself better, even if there's a slightly slower growth trajectory in those early days, by not getting wrapped up in some big partner conversation? Yeah, I'd look out for that.
Perfect. It's all about remembering, focusing, I guess, on actually the end goal that you set out from the start, isn't it? And the best way to get there may not always be the quickest. Just always having to remember kind of what it is you're setting out to do, I suppose, and what you're trying to build is key.
I do have to, at this point, also reference, of course, the PayPal eBay reality, where a partnership relationship was the transformative moment for PayPal. So it is clearly business specific. I think they found a very interesting hack from a brand and distribution leverage perspective. But I think, yeah, in our position, it wasn't comparable.
Perfect. Okay, so we've got time for one final question, and it's more of a quite a nice one to finish on. But Nick asks, kind of, what type of tests are consumers most frequently purchasing from Thriva?
So it's a real mix, is the honest answer, Nick. So when people on board with us, we put them through a questionnaire, and then our algorithms determine effectively what the mix of tests are that are most suitable to you, given your goals and background. But there's commonality, because actually lots of biomarkers have application across a variety of health areas. So, we test a lot of HbA1c for diabetes and pre-diabetes. That has an indication for things like, fertility and, a handful of others. We look at cholesterol or lipids, liver function, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, vitamin D, B12, your omega-3/6 ratio, thyroid. Yeah, that's a sort of fairly representative sample on the D2C side.
I think that's the perfect time to give Thriva a plug as well, and say if any of you's watching and you want to know more about Thriva, or you're interested in any of their kits that you can purchase or buy and use yourself, Thriva.co, so THRIVA.co is the website for the company. All of the information is on there, so please go check it out after this. They are very cool kits, and they are very easy to use. So perfect. Hamish, thank you so much for kind of joining us today and for sharing your wisdom with us all. It's been amazingly interesting, and it's been great to actually to have you on and to get to chat to you as well.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you very much for all the hard work over the years.
No problem. Long may it continue. That I guess that just kind of leads me to say that obviously, sadly, this is the last in the series of the Founder Series, but we will be back sometime in 2021. So if anyone has suggestions as to potential speakers that we could have on or to interview, or any suggestions for how we make the next season of the Founder Series just as good as this one, then please do let us know. As I mentioned at the start, all the past seasons of the Founder Series are available as box sets, as is this season of the Founder Series, and they can all be found on the Taylor Vinters website. By all means, follow us on Twitter, or drop us on LinkedIn as well. And that just leads me to say, a massive thank you again, Hamish, but also to George, to Mukesh, and to Jude for our other founders in this series, because it's been an immensely fascinating series. And thank you also to Kieran, my co-host, who's kind of done a couple of the Founder Series. So thank you all. Hope you all have a good evening. Stay safe, take care, and we will be back in 2021. Thank you.